You've probably heard bits of writing advice from Ray Bradbury over the years, but I would wager that you probably don't know about these. To assemble these techniques, I did a lot of research. Aside from reading his novels and stories, I also combed through his many commencement addresses, read his interviews for places like Paris Review and Time, and then I also bought his book for writers, Zen and the Art of Writing. And then I actually met the man back in 2005 when he did a little lecture and reading in Pasadena. All that to say, I've been working on this video for more than a year, and I've narrowed it down to the 9 most surprising and helpful techniques that Ray Bradbury gives. Let's start with number 1. Use the Jackdaw Method. So jackdaws are birds which are known for collecting all these random things. And Ray Bradbury uses jackdaws to describe his method of using word associations to create ideas for his fiction. Every morning, Bradbury would get out of bed, walk straight to his desk, and write down any nouns which came into his head. And I'll show you the type of nouns he wrote down. It was all sorts of random stuff like this. And his philosophy was that a word association helped him to get past his conscious mind and get to like a deeper subconscious writing level. And then when he was ready to write, he would just select a couple of the nouns and then use them as inspiration to sort of springboard into writing a story. So words like circuses and carnival and carousels ended up leading him to write Something Wicked This Way Comes. And the desire to write about people living on the Red Planet led to him writing The Martian Chronicles. So I'd recommend keeping a jackdaw list, a list of a whole bunch of random nouns that you think are interesting things to write about. And then when it comes time to write, you can pull from that list and combine them in unusual ways to give you new ideas. The next most important thing that Ray Bradbury has to teach writers is number 2, quantity creates quality. So there are a lot of writers out there that fret and wrestle and tinker with a novel just for decades and decades. And that was the opposite of Bradbury's approach. He said the best way to get good as a writer is simply to produce a ton of stuff. And I find it funny that he refers to it as hygiene, but he says the best hygiene for writers is to produce a ton of stories. And he said that was a mistake to start with a novel because, writers can get bogged down in it. Instead, just start with a short story form, which is much more manageable. His guidance for writers was to write 1 story a week every week of the year. And at the end of that year, you will have 52 short stories. And he said it is absolutely impossible that you'll write 52 bad short stories. Like, some of them are going to be good. Now, his schedule was every single Monday, he would start a story, he would write it and revise it until he got to Saturday. And on Saturday, he would mail that story out to literary journals and magazines. And honestly, he maintained such a strict schedule because he really needed the money. Basically, the $40 he earned from a short story would pay for his groceries. Now, this philosophy of quantity creates quality sort of sounds like it overlaps or is similar with Anne Lamott's advice in Bird by Bird to just write a terrible first draft. I'm giving the PG language here. Basically, she says that you have to be fine with just putting the words on the page, even if it's not perfect, but it's better to have a lot of imperfect words than a very small amount of perfect words. And for you writers who need a little bit more help along the process of writing your book, I am launching a new initiative. It's going to be called BOOKFOX LAB, where myself and a couple of other very highly trained New York Times best-selling authors end up helping you write your book. That includes giving feedback every week. That includes bi-weekly coaching calls. That includes live craft lectures. Guys, it's going to be incredible. Seriously, I am super pumped about it. And for all of you who enjoy Bookfox Academy, this is the next level, a more intense relationship that will really help you finish your book and publish your book. I'm currently taking signups right now because the first cohort is going to start on October 15th. And there is a limited amount of spots available. So if you really want to jump in on this opportunity, I would recommend you sign up earlier rather than later. Now, the third thing that Bradbury has to teach writers is writers should collect metaphors. Now look, Bradbury's not talking about similes and metaphors that you write inside a sentence comparing one thing to another. No, he's talking in a big picture level, like stories which are metaphors for other things. And Bradbury often got his metaphors for his stories from his own life. For instance, he says that in his book, Zen and the Art of Writing, that when he used to go walking late at night, he would often get stopped by cops who would question him like, hey, what are you doing? So he turned that little experience into a short story called The Pedestrian, where it features a world where it is illegal to walk at night. So walking becomes a metaphor for revolution, a synonym for freedom. And not walking, staying inside your house glued to a screen, becomes a metaphor for imprisonment. So what Bradbury wants you to do is simply take events in your own life that could have a bigger, deeper meaning to them and turn that into fiction. You're gonna like this next point, or at least I think you're gonna like it. It is number 4, the 3 things every reader should read nightly. So Bradbury lays out a very strict reading plan for writers. You ready for it? For the next 1,000 nights. It's like, wow, starting small, Bradbury, huh? 1,000 nights? Yeah, 1,000 nights, he says. You need to read 3 things a night, and these are the 3 things. 1 poem a night. And if you don't know what poetry to read, I would recommend somebody like Bob Hickok or Mary Oliver or Jack Gilbert or Louise Gluck. Those are all poets that I've enjoyed over the years, and Bradbury says that reading poetry will hone your capacity to write good sentences. The second thing he tells you to read every night is 1 short story. Doesn't have to be super long, might take you only 5 or 10 minutes, but he says it's essential for fertilizing your imagination. And the last thing he says to read every night is 1 essay. And he says these essays should come from a wide variety of fields, stuff like archaeology, zoology, biology, philosophy, politics, and literature. And I love what he says after this. He says, at the end of 1,000 nights, you'll be full of stuff, won't you? It's like, yeah, he's absolutely right. Like, how can you not be just filled with imaginative ideas after feeding your soul with that much material? Now, little side note he made is that he says it's okay to read trash. He's not talking about like, oh, you only have to read like very high literature. No. He says that one of his most frequent inspirations was comic strips. Like, he loved Peanuts. He loved Buck Rogers. He said Peanuts taught him a lot about child psychology, which helped him write his stories. And Buck Rogers really seeded his imagination for space travel and adventure. In fact, reading a lot of comic books ended up inspiring his short story, The Veldt, which is this short story about a kid's playroom in the future, and it's covered with screens all over the place. And then something goes terribly wrong. It breaks and there's disaster and danger, and it's a great short story. You should read it. The 5th piece of advice that Bradbury has for writers is to make a love-hate list. So Bradbury gave a ton of commencement addresses. I'm talking about like, this man spoke at every single college imaginable. And at the one at Point Loma Nazarene University here in California, he said something very interesting. He said to make a list of 10 things you absolutely love, and then to make a list of 10 things you absolutely hate, and to use these as inspiration to tell you what you should write about. For instance, he absolutely hated book burners, and he absolutely loved libraries. Well, that led him to write Fahrenheit 451. And really, you can see with a lot of authors how they use a love-hate list to inform their fiction. Look at Fight Club by Chuck Palahniuk. You combine his love for transgressive behavior and underground subcultures with his hate for consumerism culture, and you end up with Fight Club. Or look at The Master and Margarita by Mikhail Bulgakov. What did he love? He loved theater. He loved supernatural folklore. He loved biblical stories. And he combined that with a very intense hatred of Stalin's regime and the Soviet rule, and you end up with that book. So I want you to take a moment right now and think of your own reading. What is a book that you've read where you feel like the author combined their loves and their hatred to inform the book? And obviously what's wonderful about this strategy is it makes you really passionate to write the book, because you have this fervent love, you have this absolute hatred, and that sort of passion comes through on the page. Personally, as an editor, I see a lot of stories about what authors love and not as many stories that really focus on what they hate. So maybe consider in your own writing whether you're not leaning far enough into the things that you hate and putting that in your fiction. Next piece of advice from Bradbury sounds a little weird, but hang tight, it will make sense. It is number 6, learn from the lizards. So Bradbury says that all writers can learn from lizards. And what he means is that all writers should be writing quickly and thinking less. He says the faster you are and the more swiftly you write, the more chances you have to actually be honest on the page rather than overthinking it. He said over his typewriter for 25 years, he has a sign which just says, don't think. What he wants to do is he wants to get to feeling. He wants to feel on the page rather than using his intellect to mold what's on the page. He felt his way through Fahrenheit 451 because he was writing it in the basement of a library on a rented typewriter. He simply loved libraries, and that emotion got him to write that book. And by the way, he wrote that first draft of the book in 9 days. Bradbury, you're an animal. He also said that the intellect is a great danger to creativity because you begin to rationalize and make up reasons for all sorts of things, and that ends up handicapping your book. And the most common problem, he said, that when writers think too much about their books is that they try to shove a moral into the story. And he's like, no, that doesn't work. He said a ton of lousy novels come from people who are trying to do good, who are trying to make a point with their novel. That's not what fiction does best, he says. Now, this 7th point actually seems directly to contradict the previous point, but hang on, we're going to try to make it make sense. It's number 7, write about ideas. So you're probably saying to yourself like, well, ideas certainly seem like thinking, Bradbury. And in general, I would say that it's dangerous to start a book with an idea rather than, say, a person. The person becomes artificial, sort of stand-in for the idea that you're trying to communicate. But Bradbury famously described science fiction as the fiction of ideas, and I think he was onto something there. So what are the ideas in Bradbury's fiction? I'll just highlight 2. 1, the dangers of technology. He thinks that over-reliance upon technology really is harmful to human beings. And then 2, the dangers of distraction and conformity. In Fahrenheit 451, everyone's glued to these screens and they can't separate themselves out from the herd. But I might argue with Bradbury a little bit here and say that it's best as a writer if you don't start with the idea, but it's good if ideas emerge organically over time through the process of writing. And you realize, oh, on your 2nd or 3rd book, you keep on focusing on the same themes. So instead of trying to shove ideas into your book, you sort of let the ideas come out because of what you tend to write about. We have 2 more writing techniques that Bradbury has for writers, and so now let's look at number 8. Don't be afraid to cut. Listen, writers are so terrified to cut things. Why? Because it's their little baby words. They're so precious and they love them and they don't want to kill them. Well, in saunters Bradbury, and he lays it down saying, most stories are too long. But this wasn't an abstract ideal that he told other people to do but didn't really follow himself. No, this was something he actually practiced. His novel, Something Wicked This Way Comes, the very first draft was 150,000 words. Yeah, that's pretty long. So what did he do? He went in and cut 50,000 words off of it. Okay, writers, you know, like 50,000 words, I mean, that's almost a novel right there. I want you to think for a moment how much that would hurt you to delete 50,000 words from your manuscript. Well, but Bradbury did it, and there's a reason that that book is a classic now. It took an iron constitution to cut nearly 1/3 of the book away, but it was definitely the right decision. Bradbury says that the best technique to do this is simply to pretend that you are someone else, that you are not the author of this book, but you are a reader or an editor, and you're coming to the book and saying, what's best for this book? What doesn't exactly fit, or what could I cut away and the book would still work well? And lastly, number 9, I'm going to leave you with Bradbury's 3 rules to live by. They're a little tongue-in-cheek, they're a little sassy, but I like them, so here they are. 1, get your work done. He's a hard-working man. He takes no excuses. Write a short story a week, read those 3 things a night. You will succeed as a writer. 2, he says to shut up and drink your gin. All right, Bradbury, okay. And then 3, when all else fails, run like hell. I don't even know what that one means, but you know, it's Bradbury, so it's fun. Hey, just a reminder that if you want to join the new Bookfox coaching program, you should do it before it's too late. Click the link in the description and check it out. And I'm excited for you to join me on this new journey helping authors write and publish their books.